we're talking about the crisis cycle. There's one person in the relationship who's very invested in being a rescuer. They really want to help the other partner. And then the other partner, from time to time, they experience being a victim. And they have an innate need to feel supported. And the challenge for this type of couple, who we like to call emotional firefighters, is that they're always living in reaction. They're not being proactive. They have difficulty being proactive. They'll start patterns of being proactive, and then those patterns will simply collapse. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. And today we're talking about the crisis cycle. That's right, the crisis cycle. What is the crisis cycle? It is something that's really common in marriages, actually. And I see a lot of couples come into me with this going on all the time. And so as you listen to this, you got to ask yourself, could this be me? Or maybe it's somebody, maybe it's your parents, maybe it's your child, or maybe it's your best friend. This is really important because it's so much more common than any of us wants to believe. There's one person in the relationship who's very invested in being a rescuer. They really want to help the other partner. They're really super helpful, right? And then the other partner, I'm not going to say that they're invested in being a victim, but from time to time, they experience being a victim and they have an innate need to feel supported. Now, we all have an innate need to feel supported. That seems a little unfair, right? Even the rescuer has an innate need to feel supported. It's just that need shows up in different ways. And so what happens with couples who are in this pattern is life gets really normal for a while. All right. And both people develop routines and they find other things to focus on, and they both start to feel frustrated. The person who feels they're not being given enough attention under these circumstances really feels neglected, and they get angry. And the rescuer, you got to remember, the rescuer is in it to help someone who's feeling like a victim, not someone who's really angry. So the rescuer is also frustrated because they've got no one to rescue and they feel attacked. And the last thing in the world they want to be is a person who feels like a victim. And so their response very often is to point out the inadequacies of the other person. All right. And then this fight goes on until one of them feels really hurt. When the person who really wants attention allows themselves to be vulnerable and express their hurt and their feeling of victimization, then the rescuer gets to swoop in and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Oh, yeah, of course you feel that way." And then they both feel fulfilled and happy, right? One's getting the attention that they crave, and the other one is giving the attention that they crave giving. Now, why can't this go on under more normal circumstances? The chances are that both people grew up in environments where they could only give and receive attention in a certain way. It's usually programming from our childhood. And being completely transparent, some people would call this a codependency loop. And the problem with this label is that it makes the rescuer the problem, right? Oh, yeah, they're codependent. It's all on them, right? Codependency, just to give you an idea of what that is, when one person attempts to validate themselves and to feel better about themselves, fulfilled by controlling another person through helping them. The problem with that definition is it doesn't really, you can see I'm in this podcast, I am wrestling. I am wrestling to define, what do we call the other person? What do we call that person? Because it's not like they're victims all the time. It's just when they show that side of themselves, the codependent gets excited and gets involved. What is that person? That person usually has an addictive personality of some kind. And that term sounds, oh, they have an addictive personality. They must be a drug addict. No, actually, I have clients who are very addicted to their work. That's very intense, adrenaline driven work. And so they go to that work environment for long periods of time, caffeinated and adrenalized, or sometimes just adrenalized. That's all they need is the adrenaline, right? And then they come back from that space and collapse. And when they collapse, the other partner's there. Oh, yeah, you had such a hard day. Yeah, let me help you. Let me help you. And they feel empowered in helping them. And that sounds normal and natural, right? But is it really? Is it really normal and natural for us to go to work and get hooked on adrenaline and work very intensely and then stop working very intensely? It takes a very specific kind of personality to do that. What are some other addictions that are not mainstream? There might be what we call firefighters. These are maybe a better terminology for this is these are firefighters, right? Firefighters create fires so that they can put them out. Now, what happens to couples who have the firefighter dynamic going on is that sometimes a real crisis happens, an outside crisis, not something that they've generated on the inside. And they both show up superbly for it because it's what they're wired for. They're wired for crisis. They're firefighters. Okay, we renamed this whole episode Fighting Fires. The problem with firefighters is that they're always living in reaction. They're not being proactive. They have difficulty being proactive. They'll start patterns of being proactive, and then those patterns will collapse. The impact on the relationship of being firefighters is that it tends to, in the beginning, it tends to build a very intense, exciting dynamic. Then those people get together, get married, and things normalize. And then they have children, so they have a crisis, right? Children for everyone, by the way, for everyone having children is pretty much a crisis because there's no good, reliable handbook that really prepares us for it. So they have children, crisis number one. And they work together and they work together and they figure it out. And then once they get that child leveled out, once they get the child care leveled out, they move on to the next crisis. Now, sometimes in the child care stage, they create a series of mini crises along the way. There's there's who's going to take care of the child? How is the child going to be taken care of? What's best for the child? Are you really doing what's best for the child? Wait a minute, you're giving the child so much attention. What about me? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there are all these mini crises that come along. And once they have the art of taking care of the child down, they move on to the next slow period where they start creating more fires. Now, I got to ask the question, if two people are perfectly happy and satisfied doing that, why is that a problem? The problem is that when we're not proactive in life, when we're not thinking about the future, really thinking about the future, planning for the future, and life is just happening at us, there's a tendency to live hand to mouth. Or even worse, there's a tendency to be robbing Paul to pay Peter. Sometimes the crisis that we're creating is financial crisis. Oh my God, I bought a car that was too expensive and now we have to work extra hard to pay for it. Or, oh, little Johnny needs to go to a private school. How are we going to pay for that? Absolutely must go to a private school. Or no, you know what? I bought a really expensive car. And so Johnny's not going to go to a private school. We're going to homeschool him. And the next crisis is, oh my God, homeschooling isn't working. So there's a constant flow of crisis in this kind of living. And truthfully, it burns out the marriage, right? Many of the couples who come to me with this problem are on the road to divorce. They come to me because I'm the last stop before they get divorced. And once we figure out how to address this dynamic, how to disengage from it first, how to dance around it second, and how to dismantle it third, they can start to move towards living a life that is proactive, right? People who are living proactively are setting aside money for the future. People who are living proactively might be making sacrifices today, not so that they can rob Paul to pay Peter, but so that they can have a retirement fund, so that they can have a college fund. People who are proactive are planning for vacations. People who are proactive when they're engaged in a job that involves a lot of adrenaline are planning in time to detox from that job so they can really be present from their family. People who are proactive are taking care of their firefighter tendencies so that they are building themselves up and no longer need to rescue the other person to feel better about who they are. Another word for this is control the other person, by the way, but we know that you can't really control another person. And that's part of what the crisis is about, is that the rescuer wants to feel like they're in control of the other person, but they can't ever really control them. And the other thing is that rescuers are invested in always having someone to rescue. That's part of why some of the crises, some of the fires are set by the firefighters for their own excitement. It's, oh, I have to have someone to rescue. Oh, he's doing great. I need to do something to rock the boat so that I can rescue him. Now, I want to be really clear. Almost none of this happens on a conscious level. You're asking yourself, that can't be me because I don't have those thoughts. If you really look at your behavior, though, do you have those behaviors, right? If you're in constant crisis, or if you're walking on eggshells trying to avoid having a crisis and then having one, the chances are you've got this dynamic going on in your relationship to a lesser or greater extent. And the other thing I want you to know is that everybody has this dynamic going on to a lesser or greater extent. It's immensely culturally pervasive. So I want you to take a minute and on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you are? If a 10 is you've got constant fires and putting them out, and a 1 is you're on Serenity Island where nothing ever burns, where are you? Are you a 3? Are you a 4? Are you a 6? Are you an 8? Are you a 10? If you're a 6 to a 10, you probably want to get some help, and feel free to reach out to me. I give everyone a complimentary call where they are aided in figuring out what the next step is, whatever of their choosing, whatever that may be. And so always feel free to contact me because I'm in this to help people have relationships that not only work, but feel good, that where everyone's growing in the relationship, where everyone is thriving, healthy, feel good relationships. Reach out to me at richinrelationship.com, RICH at RICHINRELATIONSHIP.com. All one word, richinrelationship.com. Comment. I want to hear, what do you think about this subject? How true was it for you? Or do you know someone like this? Maybe you want to tell me about someone that you know who's like this. Sometimes people tell me about people that they know that are actually them. It's all good. Everything that you share is going to help somebody else, right? I want you to get this. If you need to share it anonymously, share it, but we're all here to uplift one another. That's the deal. And so I'm talking to you about this dynamic, which I'm intimately familiar with from my own life and from helping people to help you. And I want you to share about it so you can help other people. All right, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for coming to another episode of Rich in Relationship.